Well, welcome folks to the January Evergreen Forum hosted by NAMI Eastside and sponsored by Evergreen Health. Tonight, we are very fortunate to hear a presentation from Ty Reed, founder of Recovery Career Services. Addiction treated Ty Reed no better than it treats most people. In 2014, after years of alcohol and drug use, behind the facade of a double life, Ty found himself homeless, addicted, and unemployable. Even then, it took another 2 years of experiencing jail, a mental health commitment, and suicide attempts for Ty to hit bottom and find the desperation he needed to get into recovery. During recovery, Ty discovered that his 2-year gap in employment and his criminal convictions presented additional obstacles, even though he had an excellent work history and an MBA degree. Finding entry-level jobs were easy, but it took Ty much longer to find a path to a professional career. So his professional struggle inspired Ty to focus his energies on providing employment support for individuals in recovery from mental illness and/or addiction. Ty learned about the overwhelming amount of research that supports employment as a vital component of a successful recovery program, especially for those who may have a criminal history. In June of 2020, Ty Reed established Recovery Career Services, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people in recovery find and keep jobs. Ty is going to share his ABC model and helpful strategies for people who seek to re-enter the workforce. And NAMI Eastside is very proud to be able to present Ty Reed.
Thank you so much, Donna. And thank you everybody for allowing me to be here this evening. I am going to share my screen and do a PowerPoint. And hopefully this presentation will not be death by PowerPoint. I will try to keep this as interesting and entertaining as possible. I welcome questions at any time, so feel free to just kind of jump in when you get an opportunity. And if you let me know when you can see my screen, please. There we go. All right, can you see my screen? Perfect. Thank you so much for that. All right, so let's just start from the beginning. So tonight our presentation is titled "Getting Back to Work: Some Tips About How to Re-Enter the Job Market," and that's by Ty Reed, and that's me. And I'll just do a quick introduction. So again, my name's Ty, and all those letters after my name mean really just one thing. I've been incredibly lucky in my life is really what that means. I've been lucky enough to graduate from the University of Washington a couple of times with a degree. I have been fortunate enough to get a professional in human resources designation, which means that I have some insight into the ways that human resource professionals and hiring managers think about employment. I also have a certified workforce development professional designation, which again has given me some experience in how businesses build their workforces and how they think about making them up. And I also have some experience working directly with individuals who are thinking about their own journeys back to employment. And I'm also a Washington State certified peer counselor and feel really honored to be able to use my experience in recovery to help other folks that are making that same journey. My day job is that I work as a business engagement project manager for Workforce Snohomish, which is a nonprofit located in Snohomish County. And I spend my days reaching out to businesses, talking to them about how they can attract and retain their workforces. So again, just more experience talking to employers about how they think about constructing their workforces and what's important to them. And as Donna mentioned, I'm also the executive director and founder of Recovery Career Services. And the primary focus is providing career coaching and employment guidance for individuals that are in recovery from addiction, homelessness, and past criminal justice involvement. 3 things that I've also experienced in my life. And again, feel really honored to be able to do that work and help people. So today, just to give a bit of an overview, we're going to cover a few things. First thing we're going to talk about is what I term the ABC employment path. And I'll explain what that means and how it can be significant in the journeys for folks that are kind of coming back to the workforce after a while out of it. Talk about the 3 skills that every single employer wants. And spoiler, these are skills that everybody on this call and everyone who ever sees this presentation has the capacity to have. How to recognize all your skills that you have and how to identify those. And then ways to improve those in skill, build upon the skills that you have and the ones that employers want. If you do go to that job interview, I'm going to give you a really easy way to talk about a gap of employment that you might have if you've been out of the workforce for a time. And then finally, talk a little bit about thinking long-term when it comes to your journey back to employment and really a journey back from any challenges that you might have had in the past. So I'm going to make some assumptions here. First of all, I'm going to assume that you're ready to work. You've gotten yourself to a point in your life, you've gotten certain elements in your life settled to the point where you're actually ready to take work, that you're able to work. Again, that you have things in your life set to a point where you're able to do so. And if someone were to offer you a job tomorrow, assuming it was a job that you wanted to take, that you would actually be able to take that opportunity. And then the final thing that I'm going to assume is that you're kind of not where you want to be in your career. And whether that means that you don't have a job currently, but you want one, or it means that you have a job, but you want something different, or you want to do something that feels a little more advanced than where you are currently. I'm going to assume that that's the other reason why you're here. If you already have the career that you love, I'm not sure that this is the place for you to be, but if that's not you, then we'll have a lot of information for you. All right, so first of all, there's some good news. Employers used to have a pretty bad attitude when it came to job gaps on people's resumes. There are certain things when an employer picks up a resume that are some red flags for them. One of those is criminal convictions. The other one is big job gaps, because they always wonder, why the heck have you been out of work? But the good news is that employers have a slightly different attitude about job gaps today. And if there's one good thing about the pandemic, maybe this is the one thing, because obviously over the last couple of years, a lot of people have been out of work for various reasons, reasons that were completely out of their control. So employers don't necessarily have a high suspicion about job gaps in the last couple of years. Now, if you've been out of work for more than a couple of years, they may ask you some questions or wonder about that. But again, their attitudes have softened pretty significantly because of what's been going on worldwide in the last couple of years. So the first thing that we really want to do when we're thinking about coming back to the workforce or making a change from where we are currently in the workforce is to understand and recognize where you are. And I work with a wide variety of folks. I work with folks who have been out of the job market for 5 or 10 years because they've been in prison. I work with people who have been out of the job market for just a couple of years because they've been dealing with some mental health struggles and simply were unable to work. I deal with people that have been homeless and are coming back to the job market. And there's a very simple path that it's one that I walked and one that I recommend for everyone, especially if you're just starting off. And it's the ABC system. And it stands for A. The first thing you want to do is just get any job you can get. Doesn't matter what it is, because what we're looking to do is to reestablish ourselves in employment and get our feet under us. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what one of those any jobs might look like. B, that then leads to a better job. So once we take any job we can get and get some experience under our belts and maybe get a recommendation from that any job, we can move on to something better. I'll talk a little bit about that. And all of this leads ultimately to C, that career job or that career position. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here and how we get to that. But one of the things you're going to hear me talk about quite a bit as we go through this is planning. Thinking about, there's an arc to this. The any job leads to that better job, which ultimately is going to help us get to that career job. These things build upon themselves as we move down the path. So let's talk a little bit about the any job. And I recommend, there is one of the things that I was really in a hurry to do when I began my road back, when I got sober in 2016 and kind of started the road back to employment. I was in a hurry because I felt like I had wasted so many years with my mental health issues and so many years with my addiction issues that I was just in a big hurry to get back and get the best job that I could. But I really don't recommend that. These any jobs are important, and they're especially important if you've got a job gap of 2 years or more it's important that you kind of take one of these jobs. Just get any job you can get, because you may have forgotten how to work in a lot of ways in those greater than 2 years. So I'd recommend that you consider getting one of these more basic positions. Also, if you've never worked, so if you've never had a job in your life, typically these any jobs are kind of what you would think about as, if you're a teenager in high school, really just jobs to get work experience under your belt, build some good work habits, and then figure out what you want to do later. Because typically these jobs are only temporary. They're only a means to an end. This is something you're going to do for 6 months, maybe a year, possibly more, depending on your situation. But they're not meant to be worked forever. They're really only meant to get you work experience so you can move on to something with more responsibility and is going to allow you to grow a little bit more. You should also think about this any job if you've got criminal convictions. I've got an entire presentation about criminal convictions, so we're not going to talk about those a lot today, but this is definitely a case where if you have those, it's going to typically be more difficult for you to get to a career position right away. So working these any jobs, the A in the process is going to allow you to, again, build some experience and get some work under your belt. And then if you have, something that folks typically don't like to talk about, but this is an absolute reality, if you have any concerns about relapse or you're in early recovery, and when I say relapse or recovery, people typically think about substance use disorder, addiction, alcoholism, but this can also be the case if you've had any mental health struggles in the last few years. Perhaps it's been a process for you to get to the place where you are now, where you are healthier with your mental health. And that could include the fact that maybe you've been to therapy. Perhaps you're on medication and now that medication is working for you in your life. The last thing that you would want to do is, in very early on in a tenuous situation, is throw yourself into something very, very stressful that might jeopardize your sobriety or jeopardize your mental health. So these any jobs, these kind of very basic entry-level positions are going to give you an opportunity to get grounded in your new life and really help to set you up for the greatest success possible. So there's some qualities to an any job, and I've got this guy doing the woosah because these things tend to be not too stressful. The first thing for an any job, it needs to be flexible. And again, in early recovery, either from substance use disorder or from mental health struggles, it's important because if you need to go see your therapist, or you need to go to a 12-step meeting, or if you happen to have criminal convictions and heaven forbid, you got to go see your probation or parole officer, you want a little flexibility. You want the ability to be able to go do those things as you need to attend to your life outside of work. So if that means that your first job needs to be part-time to give you some more time, or you need to have the ability on that job to be able to switch shifts with someone when you need to, that's a great quality to look for in that those early positions. It should also be relatively low stress. Again, we don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize the progress that you're making so far in building this new life. It should also be pretty easy to get. And this also goes back to that thing about possible relapse or taking a setback early on in your journey. How disappointing would it be after everything that you've been through to get the job of your dreams and then lose it because you have a setback in your recovery or with your mental health? Probably be pretty disappointing, and it could still be disappointing if you have a basic entry-level any job to lose that as well. But the great thing about those jobs is they're really easy to get. The other great thing about it is that typically with jobs like this, and I'm talking about fast food jobs, grocery store jobs, construction jobs, these types of positions, if you work it for a short time and then something happens and you lose it because of a setback, you don't actually have to list it on your resume. It was a temporary position, so it's not going to hold you back long-term in your career. So if you lose one, frankly, you can just go get another one. And then the last thing is, it should be easy to get to the best of your ability. Even if you have a vehicle that runs great and can run for hundreds of miles, frankly, I wouldn't advise you to be driving 40 miles in traffic one way every day to work. Very stressful. If the car breaks down, then the job's in jeopardy. I would recommend that you get something that's within 5 or 10 miles of your house, so that if something happens with your transportation and you have to take the bus, that it's not a 2-hour bus ride one way to work. It's something that you could reasonably keep getting to. So those are some great qualities of those jobs. And again, I would just ask you to think about the types of positions that you thought about is when you were in high school, that you needed to get to build up those job skills. All right, so those any jobs lead to the better job. And I'll use myself as an example here. When I got sober in 2016, despite the fact that I've been really lucky and I have an MBA from the University of Washington, and despite the fact that at the time I had about 12 years of really strong corporate sales and business development experience, the first job that I was able to get was part-time as a janitor. Now, that is honorable work and it's necessary work, but I was genuinely surprised that somebody who had been as lucky with me as me with the type of background I had couldn't get something different. But it is because I really needed to take the steps on the road back. And so I actually had two any jobs early on. The first job was as a janitor, part-time. And then the second job, my any job, was as a merchandiser working for a grocery store. So when you would go into a grocery store at 11:30 at night, I was the person that was there putting tags on shelves and moving product. That's what I did. But those positions ultimately led me to the better job that I got about a year later, which was working as a sales rep for a small manufacturing company. And it was because I had those two positions before that I never thought I would have, but I got recommendations from, that I was then able to go get a better position. And that better position offered me a bunch of stuff. So it was a step or two above in a typical entry-level position. So I was progressing in my career and in my work life. But it also came with more responsibility and a lot better pay and health benefits, which was kind of handy to have. So it was better in a whole bunch of senses. And it also kind of helped lay the foundation for my ultimate career. So that better job that I took, it had me talking to businesses all the time. I was doing outside sales and I was engaging business customers, which is exactly what I do today, except now for a nonprofit. So this better job, which I worked for 3 years, was very successful at, not only by what I say, but what the company told me when I left, really helped to prepare me for the career that I was getting to. These jobs are simply a means to an end. In any job, that first job is a means to get a better job. This better job is the thing that is going to help you get to a career position. And I like to think about these as building blocks, that any job should just be anything that you get. This better job can be the job that is helping you on the road to the career that you want to have. So I'll give you an example. Your very first job could be working in fast food or working labor construction or as like an administrative assistant somewhere. But perhaps maybe what you want to do is you want to be a computer programmer. So maybe the better job that you take is working on a help desk for a computer technology company. It starts moving you in the direction of where you want to be. It gets you exposed to that industry in some way. And while you're working there, you can also study, take certifications to finally get to the career position that you want. Again, these kind of build upon each other, but it's that preparation for the career position and this more responsibility and pay that really sets the better job apart from the any job. And these jobs typically require some work experience. So again, that's why that any job is really important. Now, perhaps you haven't been out of the job market that long, and maybe you're already working a better job, but you're just kind of unsure about what direction you can go in order to get to the career position. I would, if you haven't given some serious thought to what you want to be doing in the next 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, I would say that you should start there. And that will help to determine what your next steps are as far as getting yourself to that career job. All right, and so that career position, just like this says here, this is your dream job. This is the position that you can see yourself reasonably doing for 5 years or more. And when you look back on that 5 years, you don't feel regretful that you stayed there 5 years. So these are typically the most difficult positions to get. And lots of folks are applying for these. So they typically require a little more experience. But you find these to be fulfilling, both emotionally and financially. When I say fulfilling emotionally, you don't hate going to work every day. You love the people that you work with. You feel like you're making a difference in the world, and you're happy when you leave work at the end of the day. Maybe it's tired, but still happy. And it also is more rewarding financially for you, whatever that means for you. If you're making $5 an hour, then $10 an hour probably sounds pretty good. So whatever financially fulfilling for you is, typically these career positions are going to be that. So I want to pause here because, again, I can't see the chat. Does anyone have any questions? I just want to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. If you do, feel free to come off mute and ask them now. I'll be happy to take those. I will take your silence as it's okay for me to keep going. So as I mentioned before, I spend a lot of time talking to employers, and every employer, no matter what is in the job posting, I can assure you that an employer wants 3 skills for an employee to have. And anybody who sees this presentation, anybody that's on this call now, has the absolute ability to have these 3 skills. At their heart of hearts, an employer wants an employee who is going to show up. Show up on time. And show up on time with a good attitude, ready to work. Period. These 3 things will take you a really, really long way. Frankly, 2 of these things, just 2 of them will take you a long way. If you just show up on time, even if you do great work, if you have a bad attitude, you might be okay. But we probably know some people. We've probably worked with people in the past that do really, really great work, but they have horrible attitudes, but the employer loves them because they deliver good work. But these 3 items, these 3 key skills will take you a long way. And as a matter of fact, I know a lot of people who have failed upwards. They don't do that great of work, but they always show up, they're always there on time, and they have a great attitude and they're ready to work. And that has served them incredibly well in their careers. And everyone has the capacity to do this. So there's a couple of ways that you can discover your more traditional skills that employers may want. So if you don't know what your skills are, there are a million skills assessment worksheets that are out on Google. If you just Google work skills assessment, you'll find a ton of these. I've provided a couple here, or one specifically that I like simply because I like the layout of it. With these skills assessment worksheets, what you can do is figure out what your skills are and then use that to help you build a resume if you don't have a resume. And then the bottom website is ONET Online. And this is something that's provided by the Department of Labor. And it is a fantastic free tool. And it allows you to search in a couple of different ways. If you already know what skills you have, you can use those skills to help find work. If you don't necessarily know your skills, but you kind of know what interests that you have, there's an interest matcher feature. And once you take the quizzes, it actually has some really, really nice features. It will take whatever you enter into it based on your skills and your interests, and then it'll spit out about 3 dozen or more occupations that fit those interests and skills. And it will tell you which of those occupations has the greatest outlook in the next 5 or 10 years. And then when you click on one of the occupations, it'll actually tell you what education you need, what job experience that you need to actually pursue that occupation. So it's a great tool. Fiddle around with it. You can't break it. If you ever have any questions about using it or have any questions about putting a resume together, every service that my nonprofit provides to support people in their careers is absolutely free. So I'm giving my contact information at the end of this presentation. Happy to answer any questions or help any of you in any way that I possibly can with your job search. All right, so let's talk a little bit about skills. So the really interesting thing about folks, I'm going to say like us, because I think that I share some things with people on the call here, folks like us that have gone through struggles, is that we actually have some skills that we built that aren't necessarily those traditional skills like using Microsoft Office or being able to use a 10 key. There's some other skills that we've learned. Folks that have been through mental health struggles tend to have some pretty serious wells of compassion and empathy, because we haven't always gotten that from other folks. And so we desire that. So we tend to see the best in people, and we feel badly for people when they suffer. Also, we tend to have pretty good listening skills, because quite often listening is the thing that we feel like others don't do to us. So we tend to do that pretty well. So our struggles have really equipped us with some skills. If you want to be a counselor, compassion, empathy, listening, kind of important. When I was homeless and on the street, and this is a very different way of looking at this, there are some things that I did to survive. So I got to use some of my sales skills, and I often had to deal with customers. So I had to do some communication and customer service skills, and I had to learn how to deal with inventory. So again, very kind of non-traditional ways to think about these skills. But what I'm really pointing out here is that the things that we've suffered through that have seemed to be a detriment to us in the past can actually turn out to be usable skills that will help us in our search for work and actually getting and keeping employment in the long run. And there's some pretty great ways to improve your skills. Now, some of these I know are things that you probably already know. I've obviously been talking a lot about employment here, but volunteering is a really important way that folks can improve their skills, especially if you don't have a sense of what it is that you want to do yet. So if you think that maybe, for example, you'd like to work in human resources, but you have no human resources experience, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that are looking for people to volunteer, and you can do some of that work and they'll teach you some of that work. And doing some of this volunteering will also give you an opportunity. If you have things that are a priority in your life, you can work in those areas. So for example, if you're into animal rights, you could possibly find an HR volunteering gig at PETA or at the Humane Society or something like that. So you can align your interests outside of work and then get some job skills at the same time. So if you haven't considered volunteering for nonprofits around the Puget Sound, I would encourage you to do that. And of course, you can build your skills with employment. You can do online classes and certification. You can also, of course, go back to school. The other thing you can do is that if you already have a job, you can ask for extra work. So maybe the career that you're in is not necessarily going to be in the company that you're with now, but you could always ask for a little extra work or extra projects to try to learn a little bit about those other areas. If you know that you want to be in upper management someday, if you were to ask for some extra leadership assignments around your current employer, that would be something that if you stayed with your employer, they obviously would notice that you had put in that extra work and you'll get credit for that. And even if you go somewhere else, you can always list it on a resume as something that you took the initiative to do, and that's going to reflect really, really well on you that you took the time and had the ambition to learn those extra skills. One of the first questions that I ask folks my clients that I work with, that about 80% of them say no to, is, have you told everybody in your network that you're looking for a job and the type of job you're looking for? And about 80% of the time they say no. And I know that the word network scares people because it makes them feel like they have to be out shaking hands and kissing babies and they need to have this network of thousands of people. But the truth is that just the 5 closest people to you, be it family members or friends, can actually make a real difference in your job search. And in that, you can also find a mentor. So if you have a particular industry that you are thinking about or that you might have interest in, it would be really valuable for you to find somebody who actually has some experience in that industry and just ask them if you can ask them some questions and maybe they'll agree to mentor you. LinkedIn is also a really easy place to find people who will do this. So if you have Facebook friends, you could post something on Facebook asking people or telling people that you have interest in this and see if someone can connect you. If you have a LinkedIn account, look at the people that you're connected to on LinkedIn and kind of use their friend networks like a shopping list. If you see somebody on there that's in an industry that you're interested in, ask the common person that you know for a connection or what they know about that person and see if you can make a connection that way. And then the other way to improve your skills, which a lot of people don't think about, is temp agencies. And especially for folks that are starting over or trying to get back into the workforce, temp agencies are a really great way to build job skills, to get your resume exposed to a lot of different employers, because once you engage with a temp agency, they're obviously connected to a lot of different employers and can submit you for opportunities. And all of these are temporary. That's why they call them temp agencies. So it may eventually turn into a permanent position. That's always a possibility depending on the position that you apply for. But quite often these are going to be temporary, which will allow you to learn different skills, get exposure to different companies and industries, and really kind of figure out in which direction you would like to take your ultimate career. So if you haven't considered temp agencies, I would recommend that you consider them pretty strongly. And I also want to talk about another way for you to improve your skills is a government program. And I'm very connected to this program. I work with it on a daily basis. It's called the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or WIOA is the acronym that we use for it. And it's a federal program. It's a pool of federal funds that are designed to maximize employment in a certain area. And that area, it's defined by population. And so if it's a big county like Snohomish or King or Pierce, each one of those is their own employment area. If it's someplace like Tri-Cities, then there may be 2 or 3 counties that make up an area to get enough population. And these programs are accessed through WorkSource. And in Washington State, there are WorkSource offices everywhere. If you Google WorkSource near me, I can assure you that you'll get a phone number and a website for one that's in your area. But this program specifically does a few things. So it provides work opportunities, which I'll talk about here in just a little while. Also provides funds for worker retraining. So if you want to go back and become a truck driver, there are funds available to pay for you to go to truck driving school. Or if you would like to go back to college and get other training, there are funds to provide you for education. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about who is eligible. And I'm going to say this with this caveat. This is a federal government program. There are a lot more guidelines than what I'm about to present, but I'm just going to give you a nice overview idea of generally who is eligible for these funds. So number one, if you're what we call a displaced worker or a dislocated worker, then you're eligible for these funds. And a dislocated or displaced worker is somebody who is unemployed through no fault of their own. So you can't access these funds and be unemployed because you embezzled from your last company. That's not going to work. But if you got laid off from your job, or if you're out of work for a time because you were attending to some health issue, like a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue, or just a physical issue, you had a heart attack and you're out of work for a long period of time, then you would be eligible for these programs. Also, if you're an adult who's considered low income, so if you're getting any type of government assistance, when I got sober, I was getting food stamps, for example. So if you're getting food stamps, if you're getting WIC, if you're on TANF, if you are getting HIN, if you're on Section 8, any of those programs, you typically are considered to be low income, and you're probably going to be eligible for these WIOA programs. And then the final thing, any youth that are between the ages of 16 and 24, and obviously there's a few other criteria, but generally, these are going to be the areas. It's a government program, so they're going to ask you to fill out some paperwork, ask you for your ID, talk to you a bit about your work history and your living situation. But in general, these are the groups of folks that are going to be eligible for the funds from this WIOA program. And there are 2 big opportunities for folks that have been out of the workforce to take advantage of, and I'll talk about those now. So there's 2 specific programs, and both of these programs are basically designed to entice employers to provide work opportunities for folks that don't exactly have traditional or solid work history. So the first one is a subsidized work opportunity. And what it does is once you're made eligible and you're enrolled in the WIOA program, it actually connects with employers. It places you with an employer and pays your wages for anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending on how long the employer wants that to be. And there's either paid internships and there's transitional jobs. Those 2 programs are basically the same thing. Those are both subsidized work opportunities. But the reason why I have transitional job bolded and underlined is that specific program is designed for individuals who have had inconsistent work history or have been out of work for a period of time. So if you've been out of work for a couple of years, that's the program for you. If you have had a series of jobs that you've been at for less than a year, this is probably the program for you. So again, this gives an incentive to an employer to basically provide an opportunity for you to get work experience that you could take with you somewhere else. And then there's on-the-job training. And so obviously, whenever an employer hires a new employee, there is some training that the employee has to go through just to learn how to do their job. So what this program does is it reimburses an employer 50% of the wages that you earn while you are learning that new job. So again, what these programs really do is they help lower the risk for employers in hiring workers and in having workers perform work for them. So this is the WIOA program's way of helping more people get to full unsubsidized employment. And sometimes they recognize that they have to first provide an incentive for employers in order to do that. So how do you check that you're eligible? So I'm sorry if there's anybody that's outside of the 3 big counties here, but if you're in Snohomish, King, or Pierce, you just go to those websites, you get the phone number, and then you call and ask to be connected to the WIOA team. Some of these, I know in Snohomish County, at least, they are doing in-person, so you can maybe call and get an in-person appointment. to go and meet someone, or they're doing virtual appointments as well, whatever your comfort level is. And again, I'm going to make sure that, that this slide deck is provided so it can be emailed out to everyone, so you'll have all this information. Any questions? I must be doing an awesome job. All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the job gap. So you've decided that you're gonna apply for an any job. You've got your resume together. You're ready to go out and look. You send it out. You get a phone call. You're gonna get an interview, and now you're starting to think about how are you gonna explain this job gap when the employer asks about it? Because if it's a long one, there's a good chance they're going to ask about it. Now, again, if it's because of the pandemic, if it's in the last couple of years, they're probably going to be a little more flexible with it. But if it's longer than that, you might have some explaining to do. So, and I just want to be really clear here. This is if you have no criminal record. Again, if you have a criminal record, we should talk separately. You should reach out to me and we'll have a conversation. But for folks that don't have a criminal record, so if you've been out because of substance use disorder or because you had mental health struggles, and you're trying to work your way back, there's 2 sentences that are perfect for this. So when the employer asks you, why have you been out of work? You simply say, I was out of the workforce for a time due to a health matter. I am now ready to return to work. This is so powerful and beautiful. It works on multiple levels. So number 1, I always advise everyone, every client I work with, you always tell the truth, but you're strategic in how you tell it. So this is true because mental health issues, substance use disorder, clearly health matters. The other reason why this works is because now that this has been framed as a health concern, the employer legally can't ask you any more about it. Now, that being said, if the position is one where you have some sort of physical requirement, so if it says that you've got to stand on your feet 8 hours a day, or you have to lift 25 pounds over and over again, the employer can ask you if you can perform the physical requirements of the position. But when it comes to the health matter and the reason why you were out of the job market, they legally can't ask you anything. So you've told the truth. You haven't had to say anything that you didn't want to talk about, and the employer can't ask you anything about it. So this is, in a few short words, helps so greatly in getting past this question that can cause a lot of people a lot of anxiety. All right, and so I'm going to finish up with talking about thinking long-term and then a bit of a summary. So, you know, the journey for me, I'm 6 years into this journey now. And when I think about how overwhelming the road back seemed when I started, and now I look back, you know, it's kind of like, I'll compare it to going to high school. So when you enter high school, you're like a freshman or a sophomore, and you're thinking about, oh, I got to be here for 3 or 4 years before I can get out of here. That seemed like a really long time. And then when you're like your last day of high school, you're like, what happened all the time? Where'd it go? Right? That's kind of what this journey's like. You're in the woods right now, and you didn't get there overnight. So you're not going to walk out overnight. So make sure you think about, or I would encourage you to think about all these things as long-term investments in yourself. So think long-term. Realize that that first job is probably not going to be your last job. And to be honest with you, your first couple of jobs, you might hate them, absolutely hate them, but they're going to be temporary and they're a means to an end. You might love them, you might get lucky, but again, there's a purpose to everything that you're going to be doing. And if you think long-term into how these things are merely a step on the road to where you want to get, that mindset can be really, really useful. Also, I would encourage you to think 2 steps ahead in your job search if you can. So, yeah, that's really what this ABC job path does. It helps you think about 2 steps ahead. And in this case, the 2 steps ahead is that career position. So we're going to take any job we can get to start out. We're going to take a better job, which is going to hopefully start us on the road to what we want to be doing as a career, which is ultimately going to lead us to something else. But even as you get into a career position, try to think 2 steps ahead. So you take this career position as a project manager. I'm just throwing something out here. But what you really want to do is you want to be in operations as an operations manager. Knowing that is going to help determine what extra assignments that you take within the company. It's going to help determine what mentors you take and what type of educational opportunities or certificates that you're going to pursue ultimately. So just try to think a couple of steps ahead. Obviously you want to focus on today and live in the moment, but know that this moment is going to have an impact on what's going to be happening in your employment life 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So try to think ahead if you can. Learning for the sake of learning is great if you really enjoy something, but I also say learn with a plan in mind. If you're going to spend your time learning things, try to learn things that are going to serve your career long-term, like leadership. Leadership is always a great thing to learn if you are building a career, because those are always things that you can fall back on. And eventually you might be in a leadership position. You can say that you've done that. If you are a programmer, again, try to take certifications that kind of lead you to somewhere else, but have a plan in mind. Just don't kind of do it randomly unless you're really doing it just for your own pleasure. But also be flexible, have a plan, but also end up, if another opportunity comes along that looks interesting to you, don't be so stuck to the plan that you don't give yourself the opportunity to pursue other things. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I was going to be working in the nonprofit world, I probably would have said no, because I simply hadn't been able to envision it yet. But when the opportunity came along, it showed up, and it was clear that the skills that I had would be a great fit, and it would allow me to give back to the community that's given so much to me. It seemed like a really natural fit, but only because I was open to it and flexible enough to make a shift did this opportunity really present itself. And then the other thing is, don't sell yourself short. It is so easy, often in early recovery or for people that have suffered through things, to doubt your abilities. It's so easy to think that I can't do this, I can't do that. I've never achieved great heights before, so I'm going to be limited to this. I can only work at this level. But this Napoleon Hill quote that's on the right of the screen, I really love. Whatever the mind of man or woman can conceive and believe, it can achieve. That almost sounds a lot like I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly. But it really is. If you think that you can, then you probably can. If you're willing to put in the work and you treat people right and you have a plan, you'll be amazed at the things that you can achieve in a very, very short period of time. I know 6 years sounds like a lot, but 6 years is nothing. And it could be a lot shorter for you. It didn't take me 6 years to get here. It's just that, it's been a 6-year process. So again, think long-term about these things. You have a lot of life left. And if you need to give just a few years to ensure that the quality of the rest of your life is going to be pretty high, I would argue that it's worth it. So as a summary, again, employers just aren't as concerned about job gaps as they were in the past because of things that have happened in the pandemic. Use that ABC employment path, and I would encourage you to focus on building your skills and think long-term. Here is my contact information. On my website, there's a ton of resources. Again, everything that my nonprofit does is 100% no charge to you. So if I can help with anything, if that means putting together a resume, figuring out how you're going to tell your story to an employer, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, I've got about 5,000, literally 5,000 friends on LinkedIn. So feel free to look through my LinkedIn profile. If there's someone there that you want to be connected to or an industry that you're interested in and I can help, I absolutely will. And the link that I list here is for my resource page. On that resource page on my website, there are a number of links that talk about employment and mental health and recovery and a bunch of different stuff. So again, if I can be of any service to you at all, to you or anyone that you know, please let me know. I would love to help. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and happy to take questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Is the slide deck available at your website, or is that just going to be sent out en masse if we registered for this Zoom meeting?
Second one. So the slide deck is not on the website, but I will make sure that that Mark has it. And if you registered for the meeting, you will definitely get this slide deck. So all the links work and my contact information is there as well. So please reach out if you need me.
Cool.
Any other questions? I have a question for you, Ty.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so NAMI East Side works with YWCA
Mhm.
as a partner, and they have a job skills program. We hired 2 of the interns that we took in from YWCA in part-time positions. My question is, can we get 50% reimbursement for on-the-job training?
Well, for those folks, no. So only because you need, as a business, you need to have signed up for the program before they are hired.
Ah, okay.
That's the only catch. But if you want to be, if you would like to be connected with the Workforce Development Council in King County, I'm happy to make an introduction for you, and they can fill you in on their programs and get you ready to go when that comes up again.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Any other questions, folks? All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ty, very much. This was very, very helpful. And I think people will think about it and think about either their loved ones or themselves who they can help with getting back into the workforce.
Yeah.
Sita, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Di.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to everyone as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you. Thank you, Di.
Thank you, folks.